welcome to this episode of Martial Truth Podcast, my interview with Richard Moon. Richard Moon is the author of this new book, which just came out this week, Quantum Aikido, The Power of Harmony, Richard Moon, by Richard Moon. Richard is an 80 years young practitioner of Aikido. He's trained in several arts. He's also been an international negotiator, musician, very interesting guy. Looks at martial arts from a little bit different perspective, which I'm all for. I mean, I don't need it to always be about my perspective. I like to see other people's perspective. So the book's quite interesting. I started reading it for especially my scientific-minded martial arts people. This definitely might be for you. And there's also several chapters on Sensei Ueshiba, the founder of Aikido. So very interesting. So the book just came out this week. It's available on Amazon, so please feel free to get it. As always, please click that like, share, subscribe button. Consider becoming a monthly member. I just did the second live YouTube class. People seem to have liked it. So we'll plan on another one probably for next month or the month after. And we're closing in on 150 podcasts. Who'd have thunk it, right? Okay. So Master Chen Zhanghua will be here in Arizona, first weekend in February. There's still spots available. If you're interested in that, reach out to me. He'll also be in New York the last weekend in January. You can reach out to James Waller at my New York school or reach out to me. I can give you information on it too. All right. So here's my interview with Richard Moon. Richard Moon, welcome to the Martial Truth Podcast. Richard is the author of Quantum Aikido, The Power of Harmony. All right. Very interesting book, little bit different take from what I've seen on Aikido, which makes it a little bit more interesting to me. Very scientific approach to Aikido, talking about some concepts, little difficult, quantum physics and some different things, but some interesting theories, 1 + 1 = 1, and different things. I'm reading through the book. Don't think I'm not. And Rich has got a varied background. So Richard, why don't you introduce yourself and give my listeners an idea of your background and, why this particular book, and let's go from there.
Well, Michael, I have a really funny thing. I'm not much of a believer in too much of the mystical stuff or reincarnation or something. And yet, when I was a kid, before I ever studied any martial arts, being kind of small for my age, I would always, when my friends would grab me and try and wrestle with me, I'd always find myself doing nerve holds on them. And they would always tell me, don't use nerve holds. And I would say, well, don't be bigger than me. And then there was another thing. I was able to do hard falls, sutemi, and so they always loved to fake fights and get to throw me and stuff like that. I have no idea where that came from. So I always have this feeling of maybe there is something to that stuff. I don't know, because I've always had an inclination towards the Orient that I never understood, and very young I got into meditation, and Alan Watts was one of the influxes there, but that, and then at one point, as I joined this rock and roll band, I kind of got into music and got drawn into a rock and roll band by this old guy. He was 24, I was 17, and one of the guys in the band took me. We were in this place in Marin County, out into the canyon, as we called it, and he showed me some Tibetan breathing exercises.
Okay.
And it blew my mind. One of the other guys in the band was a karate black belt, had been on a championship team, and he started teaching me karate. And I got it right away. There was just something magical to me about the idea of, I think the main thing I could bring back to you was he was into like water, like stone. Have you heard that phrase?
Sure.
Yeah. And I just, it started to click into this whole other transformational world. And then at some point I was teaching yoga, and this guy, his name was Henry Jacobs. We call him Sandy Jacobs. He was the guy who actually recorded all the Alan Watts tapes.
Okay.
And was connected with the Committee Improv Theater, which I'd been involved with at that point. And he starts calling me up, And I was at this point running a little health food restaurant in Marin, and he's going, "You got to see this guy. I just met this guy. It was Robert Nadeau, uh, who studied with O Sensei, and Bob Noah, who you've had on your show, was a longtime student of his. At that point, I hadn't met Bob Noah yet, and I was so busy teaching music in a couple high schools, teaching yoga, running the restaurant, had another kid on the way, whatever. And
Yeah.
I just, well, I'll get,
Life, right?
yeah,
That's all right. Life, right? Yeah.
I'll get there, Sandy. But at any rate, one night I go to the College of Marin where one of my yoga classes was, and they scheduled an Aikido class in the same room. And this guy comes in, he's very uptight and it's, whatever. And I'm like, he's kind of the opposite of attractive is the way I would describe it. And I finally just said, look, why don't you just relax? We'll do Aikido tonight. I'll straighten it out next week. We'll whatever. And 1 minute in, just 1 minute in, and as much as the guy was, I mean, virtually repulsive to me, the art just, so I called Sandy up immediately. I said, okay, pick me up on Saturday. He drags me into the city, and we go to study with Robert Nadeau. I meet this guy, and have you had any contact with Bob at all?
So Robert Nadeau, no, I've read the book that you guys wrote on him. And I had not heard of him, which I mentioned to Bob Noah that I was kind of surprised at, to be quite honest. Because I have traveled in some Aikido circles. I was given a tour of the Hambu Dojo by
Uh-huh.
Kishimoto, the current doshu, uh, in Tokyo years ago. Oscar Ratty was a really good friend of mine. Used to have lunch with him once a month in the city. Author of The Secret Samurai and Aikido and Dynamic Sphere. So I've always been around Aikido practitioners. So I was a little surprised when I hadn't heard of Nadeau Sensei, and then when I looked into his background and saw, it was kind of interesting. And that's what's good, I think, about this kind of stuff now, right? So years ago, when there was no internet, and it's hard to hear about these different people, right? Now, though, with everything being so connected, I mean, we can find out about different people. So for me, it was a pleasant surprise when I found out about him. Fact that he was a police officer for a time, so again, my background in law enforcement, so interesting. Still around. I mean, he's an older guy now. He's still around, and he's you know so yeah, so that's how I was introduced to him, through the book that Bob Noah sent to me.
Well,
So
he has a bit of a rep in the Aikido world because he did spend time with those sensei and he did have a personal connection with the founder.
right.
And I'll come back to him in a minute. At any rate, I just immediately knew that this was what I was looking for, and I had been looking at karate and judo dojos and whatnot for some maybe a year, and maybe a year prior to that into my yogic thing. I would have never thought I would have been that interested in martial arts, and if you'd have
Right.
told me I was going to teach martial arts for a living, if you can call it a living,
Right.
uh,
Right. Right. Yeah.
that I would have laughed in your face, but I just I couldn't get myself to cross the threshold in any other dojo, and like I say, it came and got me. I went to see Bob, and I just was swallowed up. I couldn't. I was like a heroin addict.
Right.
I mean, I don't know what to say. It was like, and third class, one of his other black belts, a guy named Alan Groh, was having a gashku, a 5-day training or something. I asked permission to go. He said, "Well, how much experience have you had?" I said, "Well, I've had 3 classes." He
Right.
said, "You should have more." I said, "Look, I'll pay for the workshop. If I can't take it, I'll quit, whatever. But you keep the money, whatever." And it was a huge sum back then. It was $20, and of
Wufa.
course, you
Right.
got to understand that's like $500 now in
Well,
terms of what you
well,
would buy. But
well,
this is 50 years ago,
yeah.
60 years ago.
Well, it's funny when I got into karate because I wanted to learn how to defend myself. There was groups of kids in the area I lived in that like to give you a hard time as a group. So I decided I want to learn how to fight, and I just went to my local YMCA. And again, I was like you, I was hooked initially.
Yeah,
And again, I think back then at the YMCA, that's 1979. I think I was paying $15 a month.
yeah, yeah. Right, right, right.
You know, so things have changed.
At any rate, so I go to this workshop, and I didn't know anything because where we were training at the Unitarian Church on Franklin and Geary, and we were in a room. We didn't have mats. We didn't wear gis. We didn't use Japanese words. We called Bob Bob. We didn't use all the there was.
Right.
And he said, we're Americans. We don't have to be whatever. No picture of O Sensei. We didn't roll or fall. We just, he was teaching us these principles more than anything. And I always felt blessed that that was my introduction because I understood Aikido as this harmony with the energy. It had very little to do with wrist twisting or any of that stuff. Not that we didn't do some of that, and eventually we got mats, and then it turned into a thing. But so I walked into this dojo. I didn't know to bow. I whatever. They were in the middle of class, and I sit down, and there's a little stack of these brochures there called the Memoirs of the Master, which is what I sent you. And I open it up, and I hit this one that goes, winning means winning over the discord in your own mind. And I thought, holy cow, is this, and then everything else that O Sensei said just was so in harmony with where I was coming from. I wanted to be able to protect myself. I mostly wanted to be able to protect these kids that I was having. And I was never a fighter per se. And I just, whatever. So I started studying. Then I went on full time, and I was just making my own gashku by going from one class to another at other schools, as many classes as I could get. And very quickly, I became interested in other martial arts a little bit, and I studied a couple ones. I wish I could remember who the teacher's name was. He had a thing called Changing Wei. He'd been a karate champion and something else, and he mixed in a couple other arts, and it just, it was very playful, and I really
Right.
liked it. And then I went to study Capoeira
Okay.
with Bira Almeida, who was three-time world heavyweight champion. I loved this guy. He was a samba player. He was just the most beautiful character and monster martial artist. Obviously,
Right.
he chased big guys around the room without hurting anybody. He was just
Right.
so in control of his thing, and they do it to music, and it was
Right.
it was really great. And one of my other friends, Richard Heckler, who you may have heard of, he trained with me with that, and then I. One night, Peter Ralston, I don't know if you know his name.
No.
Peter Ralston was won the Open Kumite in China. He's a world
Okay.
champion, and never defeated. Unbelievable martial artist character. I didn't know who he was at the time, and he came in, and Bob asked me to work with him and stuff. And I just liked him. I just liked something about what he had, so I went and trained with him for a couple of years, along with all the other stuff. And I kept up the martial arts in that broader spectrum for probably into my 10th year, certainly five, somewhere towards 10. And then about then, it just kind of all dropped off for me. And not that I never saw him. I would occasionally go visit Peter, and whenever I could see Bira, I would do that. But I just began to get into this other world, which is really when I came in, I thought I can tell this stuff would help my music. Took me about 40 years till I got to what it was that it was going to give me. And now my music is better than it's ever been. And it's really got to do with whatever comes out of this world we're going to get right into next. But that's most of my background. And one of my, because I wanted to play with something that nobody was doing, including Bob, although he is unique beyond belief. A lot of people have a lot of trouble with him. Some people just totally love him. And I probably have a mixed feeling in a certain way if you've worked with teachers who are not easy,
Right.
but they're great.
Right.
And Bob's been both. And he's, been my main teacher for 55 years. And but I started to open this little thing just to train with a few friends so we could do this freestyle, which we got into because in the beginning there was just one class in the city, and you had to go down to Mountain View from where we were, which was a long drive. And so we just used to train out on the grass and stuff like that.
Right.
Got into a very open exploration. So I opened this little thing, and then a friend called me and asked me, found a judo school and blah, blah, blah. It grew into a school I ran for about 35 years called
Okay.
Aikido Marin. And, I can't remember how many black belts we trained and stuff like that. It became a real school. But one of the students, a guy named Chris Thorson, who had done some employee assistant stuff, wanted to get into executive coaching, and he kind of dragged me into it. And we found ourselves, at a couple of huge startups. One of them became Nextel.
Okay.
We ended up working with just a lot of large corporations, and a lot of executives and stuff. And I was coming out of, this rock and roll, whatever, pot smoking, whatever, just the opposite of anything you would think of in the martial world or the
Right. Or the
executive
or the
world
corporate world, right?
or the corporate world,
Right.
exactly. And I found that I just loved everybody I met. I had great relation. It was just, the whole thing was, and it grew me so much. It was such a beautiful experience. And then one time he asked me, "Well, would you go to this conference? We're supposed to go represent us." And a lady comes up to me and goes, "Are you the Aikido teacher?" I go, "The Aikido teacher?" And, I teach Aikido. And she comes to my class and she gets off the mat in this freestyle approach. She said, "I got more in 30 minutes with you than I've gotten in 9 months training in this regular style."
Right.
And we'll get into the style thing in just a minute. But she was said, "Would you come and work in Cyprus with me?" And the next thing I knew, she was going to do a thing in Bosnia. And I took one of my corporate clients, a guy named Dan Whalen, who's become a very, very dear friend and quite a big player. And he funded this huge project in Bosnia, which my wife ended up running for him for a little over a dozen years. And a couple of the folks that worked with her in Bosnia, the people who were her main people there, came to dinner a few years back. And I said, when I asked Dan if he would maybe donate, he had just sold his company. I knew he made, 10, 20, 50, $60 million, whatever it was. I thought, well, maybe he'd give 5 grand to this institute that the lady in Bosnia was from. And we were doing a camp for the Cypriots and in Washington, D.C. And I call his secretary, and he happens to be in D.C. at a meeting, and he's going to the airport. And would we meet him at the airport? So we go there. I start to explain to him what I'm doing with her in terms of this international work. And I don't even get halfway through my first, paragraph, and he's going, "I'm in." And he funds this project. And so I was laughing when these two folks came to have dinner with us, and we invited Dan over. And I said, "Yeah, I was hoping he'd give, 5 grand." I thought, he might give 20.
Right.
And also the guy says, he said, "We were trying to figure it out the other day. And we figure, he's put about 250 kids through college. And he said, we figure he's spent probably 30 to $40 million on this project so
Wow.
far." So it turned out to be a really phenomenal thing. It was just
So
fantastic.
what was the project exactly? What kind of project are you talking about?
Well, what he took was he took a group, there was a group that was forming there, took them and asked them to invite the best people they could find and bring them together. And we went to a little island in Lake of the Woods in northern Minnesota where he had been a camp guide for this place called Lake Trails, where they do take kids out on these week-long canoe trips. And so we brought these Bosnians to the island. We gave them leadership training, and then they would go back, and Carol, my wife, worked with them to help develop projects in the Bosnia world.
Okay.
One of the ladies started a kindergarten where they brought all three, the Serbians, the Croats, and the God, why am I slipping on it here? The Muslims,
Okay.
whatever they're the Bosniaks, whatever they call them, and um, and these people were kind of like the Cypriots; they were at each other's throats.
Right.
So bringing these kids together and starting to work them together, and one of the guys who worked with this lady who brought me there, her name was Louise Diamond. She's long gone now, but was a guy named John McDonald. He was a U.S. ambassador at large. And he did say at the very end, he's gone now too, but towards the end, we were on a thing thanking Dan and him and whatnot. And he said it was the most successful international project he'd ever seen. And what these kids have done, and a bunch of them they just been so successful. And I know every one of them feels like I feel, just blessed to have been part of that.
Right.
And it turned out to be this fantastic thing. And then in the process, one of the people who worked with Dan, a lady named Joan Diamond, asked me to come work with a group called the Nautilus Institute for Peace and Sustainability. They were working with nuclear security and whatnot in the Pacific Rim and having some serious problems. So I went and worked with a couple of the co-founders. And I don't know, have you done any Aikido per se?
I would say no, but again, like I was good friends with TK Lee down
Okay.
in Texas. I traveled to his dojo a couple of times to teach jujitsu seminars. So, and
Well, you
I,
would get it in jujitsu too. There's a
yeah,
place where you
yeah,
when you do a really good throw,
well,
it's like you don't do anything.
right. It's like, well, even TK one night asked if he could demonstrate some techniques. So he used a couple of my senior jujitsu students. And he told me afterwards, he said, I got to be honest with you, Mike. I was a little shocked. It was like your guys knew what to do. He goes, they were very adept. He goes, normally, but it was great. It was very easy working with them. And I said, well, that's kind of the way it should be. So, yeah, I mean, look, Aikido comes out of Aiki Jiu-Jitsu, whatever you want to call it, right? So there's so many similarities between the two, you know. So,
Well, the essence to me was is that when you've done it, there's a blend that takes place, and
yeah,
there's no force per se. You're
right,
you're doing something. You're moving in harmony. You're
right.
neutralizing the force through your positioning and whatnot, and you're blending with their energy and leading their energy in ways for resolution. And anyhow, so it was like I felt like I didn't do anything, but these people whatever it was, and drew me into the Nautilus Institute.
Okay.
And I think I'm still, on their website and whatnot.
Right.
And they took me around the world too. We got to work in a bunch of conferences. So that's how the whole thing kind of spread out from basic yoga to martial arts to music to yoga to martial arts to corporate consulting to international peace building.
Okay.
And in the process, of course, I began to look at these things because there's one more piece I want to go before I ask you, which is I began to realize that there was something else happening. And Bob said often, oh, Sensei wasn't that interested in making martial artists. He was interested in showing that what he had done, this process of awareness that he had done through martial arts, was accessible to everyone, and that he wanted everyone to learn the process and become a better police officer, a better architect, a better dishwasher, whatever you were doing to come to it at a level of mastery. And I said to Bob one time, you said over and over this thing about I said, was that something you kind of inferred, or was that something he was explicit about? And Bob said he was very explicit about that. So one of the videos I have up on my Moon Sensei channel on YouTube is called The Core of Power. And I recommend it because it's a beautiful introduction to Bob. But in it, he talks about, you've had an okay day, and every now and then you have a good day. And on a rare occasion, you have like a great day. You make the right phone calls, you know what to do. On a bad day, you drop your keys 3 times. And,
Right.
he said it's like, and for most people, it's like that just happens. And it's,
Right.
you bear with the bad ones, you enjoy the good ones. He said, but Sensei taught us that there's a process. So just to leave that, you've heard the phrase, if you're going to be smart or lucky, you're better off to be lucky.
Yeah.
Everyone, I think, knows how to get smarter if they want to. You read a
Right.
book, you study with a teacher, you practice. But do people know how to get lucky? And so what I realized was this process Bob was teaching that he saw Sensei do was, and did you ever study with Mr. Tohei or see him? He had a 4-point thing. Keep 1 point was his main
No,
theme.
but I'm familiar with him because Oscar Ratty spoke about him.
At any rate, so whatever the process is, this standing on the floating bridge was Sensei's term for it, as I understand it, changes your luck in the world. And so all this stuff unfolded in my life. And like I said, I never graduated high school. How it happened, I'll never know. But it's been a beautiful, and it took me into this incredible exploration where I worked with people from MIT and Harvard and all these brilliant minds, Peter Hayes from Nautilus Institute. And so I got into quantum physics, quantum mechanics, and whatnot, and the whole thing kind of merged together. So that's the story of how this whole came together. And then I kind of want to turn it back to you for a minute. And I understand you were 25 years, is that right? Police department in
A
New York
little
City.
less, a little over 22 years.
Okay, let's be fussy here. Uh, and Bob Noah also told me that you had learned something about or developed a system of handcuffing someone that you actually teach around the country now.
Yeah, I mean, when people want me to do it, I teach it. I mean, I don't do it as much as I used to, but yeah, I what happened was, through, I did the techniques first on the criminals, meaning figured out how to make them work because some of the techniques I had been shown worked great in the dojo didn't initially work so great in actual combat. I immediately realized it wasn't the technique, it was how I was taught to do the technique. Because the techniques, like for instance, kotegaishi, the basic wrist lock, it's found in every conceivable martial art, cross cultures, everywhere. So you're not going to tell me the technique's no good. It had to be the way I was doing it. So once I figured out, I realized, okay, now I have this catalog of techniques that I'm using to subdue criminals. So then what I did was I developed a set of 8 two-man kata. And what the person, when I grabbed the person to place them in handcuffs, I trained the person to resist the way the criminals resisted in the actual situations.
Right.
So now your response is based on the actual way that people are resisting within that situation. So I would teach it to groups of cops. I would often a week or two later get phone calls saying things like, I was in the academy 6 months. Nothing I was shown there really worked. I worked with you for 4 hours and I did the technique last night. I can't believe how good it worked. And I said, well, yeah, that's the whole idea. The whole idea is to train in the way where it is very similar to the actual thing that goes on in combat. Um, so that's how that came about. So I figured out the techniques for real first, which were based on techniques I'd learned in karate and jiu-jitsu, because Okinawan karate has a lot of joint locking also. And
Uh-huh.
then refine them. And then I said, oh, you know what? I think it would be good. 'Cause at the time, I had many police officers training in the school. Let me put together these techniques in like this package, and everybody liked them. So that's how that came about.
Well, the thing that Bob said to me was that, that you've encountered so many people. You've dealt with people who
Oh,
are there and resisting and whatever,
oh,
and
yeah.
it's real for you.
Oh yeah.
The thing, and I respect that tremendously because I really, because of the other martial arts training I had, because of my personal approach, I really have tried to deal with what's effective in the art. And I think the majority of people, and I probably will get shot in the back for saying this, that the majority of people who train Aikido, I think, are living in a certain kind of fantasy.
It's not just Aikido.
Yeah, it's not
It's
just Aikido.
Aikido. Let's say Aikido is a little bit can sometimes be a little bit worse in that regard.
Yeah,
But the first podcast I ever did, the title was "Who Are You Training to Fight?"
right.
And I go into karate schools, I do karate seminars, and they're countering karate punches. No one ever threw a punch at me like that. No,
Right.
yeah. So again, I totally understand where you come from. And one of the things I wanted to touch on too is like, you know, so my life has been a lot of violence, but my violence was used to stop society's predators from hurting other people, right? But it's interesting in all these arts I do, there's a moral code. Like within the jujitsu style, we have literally a list of directions that you're supposed to follow. And it's a moral code, right?
Right.
But I think in order to get to, again, I think for warriors to get to that place of morality, that place of spirituality, of philosophy, however you want, even Ueshiba Sensei, you watch the early video of him pre-war where he's bald and he's throwing those guys around. The guy's coming at him with the bayonet, he's sending them flying. There's nothing gentle about the way he's tossing those guys around. And I think, again, I think he came to a certain point and realized certain things and realized, well, I want to use my martial arts as this spiritual vehicle, which again, I say all the time. I'm very hardcore self defense, but I also think I'm a pretty spiritual person. And I say all the time in all the arts I teach that the ultimate goal is to create a good human being. It's, and again, I teach, okay, if a guy comes at you like this, I teach people how to hurt people. All right. But I'm also teaching them, okay, well, you should only do this if someone really tries to harm you. There's no, and we've had situations in the school throughout the years. I mean, I'm teaching since 1983. Where I had to throw people out because they were there. They just want to learn to hurt people. Okay, well, that's not the business we're in. We're in the business of teaching you how to defend yourself, and hopefully you never have to use it. But if you have to use it, it saves your life or saves the life of someone else, which I think is a very high ideal, you know? So I
I'm
think
with
it's interesting. I think as martial artists, I think we start in this violent context of learning how to fight. I think then, though, if that's all it's about, I don't think people last. I think if it's just about the fight, I think people drop out. But I think they get into the whole of it, which is historical, physical fitness, health, yes, self-defense, the movement, the study of the movement, of the body mechanics. It's fascinating, you know. And again, you're looking at it now from, so we'll segue into this idea of quantum physics and how it applies to Aikido. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
All right. Well, the question that I have for you, so you've
Sure.
had probably hundreds of engagements
Yeah,
with people
yeah,
that were physical and violent and whatnot, and you've dealt with that. And that was in your role as a police officer.
right.
Have you ever had cause when you're out of uniform? Have you ever been attacked or dealt with your techniques in that way off the mat
Yes,
outside of your role as a police officer?
yes.
Give me a brief history of
Um,
that.
So again, why I got into karate was my parents had been attacked by a group of teenagers
Uh-huh.
when I was growing up. I started to learn karate. I was probably only training about a year. My parents had had those kids arrested. They were warned in court to have no contact, but they decided they were going to have contact with me. And back then, I was a newspaper boy. I delivered newspapers every day, and the thugs lived on the blocks where I delivered the newspapers. So eventually, what they do, they were afraid. The initial thugs were afraid they couldn't put their hands on me, so they got one of their friends to try to do it. And again, I was at a very low level, but I came out on top. And then a few weeks later, that same individual decided to wait for me on the way home from karate class. A couple of my friends noticed there was a large group of them, literally 20, 25 of them waiting for me. And my two friends were not fighters. So I told them to listen, you guys go and don't worry about it. So three of them initially came up to me, and one was the same guy. And he said, I'm going to fight you again. And I said, okay. And we fought again. It was a little bit more violent, a little nastier. And as I was fighting him, I had other ones yelling at me, I'm next, I'm next. And I was like, fine. And I took him apart. Um, and nobody else wanted to be next, right? Um, so that was probably the earliest time that I used my martial arts skills. Um, there were times where I was off duty as a police officer and a crime took place and I effected the arrest. And sometimes I would have to, I put the guy in control with a joint lock. One of the things I came to understand is um, we can't comprehend what it feels like to be placed in a real joint lock. We think, oh yeah, we tap, it hurts in the dojo. We think that's what it's going to feel like. No, the pain it's incomprehensible. So I learned early on that if I grabbed a guy and I was putting him in the position to handcuff him, it was safer for me and safer for him if he knew right away that it would not be a good idea for him to continue the fight. So I would give him that pain that is indescribable, and he'd become very cooperative very fast.
Right.
So
Right.
keeping me more safe, keeping him more safe. So yeah, so there were times, and even to this day, I'm retired for as a police officer. It's going to be 16 years. But if I'm in a parking lot and I see two guys attacking someone or an old woman getting grabbed, I mean, that I personally feel my function in life is to be a protector of society, and so
God
I would
bless you.
immediately go and help the person. I mean, that's just the way it is, and that's the way I am. And even my wife knows. My wife was with me on more than one occasion where I made an off-duty arrest, and she would just be like, "Okay, I'll see you at home later." And she'd walk away, and I'd go deal with the situation, and that would be that. So so I've always felt that that's one of the reasons I was placed on the planet was to be a protector for people that can't protect themselves.
Well, that's what Budo really means, right? To
Yeah,
stop weapons, to
yeah,
stop war, to make
yeah.
peace. And I guess I'll push it one more time, Mike, is have you ever been just, coming out of a restaurant and had somebody jump you, or had that kind of unexpected attack, people break into your house and attack you,
No, I
or
never had that. I had a guy attack me at a seminar from the behind when I was talking to two little kids. Two little kids. I just finished teaching my seminar. Two little kids came up to me to ask me a question. So I was leaning down to talk to them because my anybody that approaches me, I stop and engage them. I cannot stand the senior dons that talk down to people, treat people. So two little kids ask me a question, I stop. I'm going to explain and give them the answer. As I was in the middle of talking to them, someone attacked me from the rear. And he didn't enjoy the experience. And the thing is I didn't hurt him per se. He felt what I did. All right. And then afterwards, he said to me, well, you're always introduced as the guy that really knows how to fight. And I wanted to see if it was true. And I looked at him and I said, well, I guess now you found out. Right. And I will tell you that at lunch that day, my students, the majority of my students had never seen me move real. But some of the guys that I trained that were my students in the dojo, one of them is still with me. Those guys had fought side by side with me. So they had seen me on numerous occasions. They knew the difference of what me moving in a real situation and what me moving in the dojo are two very different things. So it was interesting to see the reaction of the students that had not experienced that. And they were a little shook up. And one of them actually said to me, Sensei, we've got to say to you that it was a little scary seeing you move like that. And I said, well, now you've seen what it's like when it's more real. I said, and when it's real, it is scary. It's also scary though for the guy that's being attacked, right? I mean, there's no, so yeah, I've experienced a lot of violence. I mean, the majority of it as a police officer, but other areas too. I mean, look, I had a 13-year-old take a swing at me here in the dojo a couple of years ago in Phoenix. And I didn't hurt him, but I made it clear to him that if you ever do that again, so what did he do? He quit. So again, which was the perfect outcome of that situation. It's either you submit and learn how to be a good human being, or quit and go someplace else. And that's what he did. He quit. And again, so for me, it's never been about the money. So like I had to actually, when I left my school in New York, one of my senior guys took over and I said to him, remember, there's always addition by subtraction. You're thinking, oh, I'm losing a paying student, but in reality, you're losing a problem. And that problem maybe will allow 3 more people to come in the door who wouldn't have joined or lasted because of
or would
that
have left.
problem. Right.
Yeah, right.
So, again, I like you, have been doing this a long time and have experienced highs and lows. The only difference with me is, from a lot of other martial arts people, is I have experienced a lot of violence. And again, looking at me, I think some people think, I'm exaggerating. And again,
Right.
they can think what they want. I could care less. But like, if you sat down and spoke to my one student in New York who has seen me do many things, right, for real, like I'll give you a quick thing. We were sitting with 3 senior dans in Jodo, the stick fighting art in Japan. And I got up to go to the bathroom. And my senior guy, Ray Santiago, was sitting there. And one of them asked him, what's it like when Mike fights? And Ray said, you blink and you miss it. That's what he told me his response was. So I laughed when he said it, right? But again, that's one of the things we think we're moving a certain way in the dojo. We think we're moving fast. And to other people we are. But when it's real, your body is capable of moving in a way that is just, it's amazing. It's amazing. So it doesn't feel amazing to you when you're doing it. Like I've had people say to me, Sensei, I did a ruminage one time on a criminal who had sharpened rings, was cutting my hands as I was going to grab him. My brain clicked in that he was cutting my hands. I moved right in. I did a ruminage, instantly knocked him out. My senior jiu-jitsu student was at the scene with me. He saw the whole thing. I said to him, boy, that technique worked really well. He said, what technique? I said, I did a Rimanage. You know, it's the same technique we have in jiu-jitsu. You guys in Aikido, it's the same. I moved in, leg behind his leg, my arm in front, wham, boom, boom. He went down, head hit, unconscious. He goes, I never saw you move. He goes, you were standing here. The next second you were there, he was on the floor. I said, what are you talking about? I moved in. I did. It didn't seem faster to me. It didn't seem any different from the way I did it in the dojo. But when all those chemicals and all those things start happening in your body, and it's real where it's you or him, someone's going to be seriously hurt. And that's the only way this is going to stop. You're able to move in a way it's amazing. It's just, and again, I never realized that until someone standing there said to me, you know, and I was in other things where I did something and people said to me, you punched the guy. And I looked at him, I said, no, I kicked him. And they're like, no, you punched him. I saw you clearly. You punched him. And one of my other cops is standing there and he's going, no, he kicked him. And even the criminal is saying, no, he kicked me. And the other guy goes, I know what I saw. You punched him. So I jokingly say, too, that's how these martial arts legends start, right? Things happen. People don't even realize what they see. They think they saw something, but they didn't really see it, you know? So yeah. But, you know, again, like I say to myself, you know I'm capable of great violence, but I'm not a violent man, meaning I never look for trouble. I don't want any trouble. If I can talk my way out of it. My good day as a police officer was I catch a bad guy, I tell him to put his hands behind his back, and he just puts his hands behind his back, and I handcuff him. Good day. But I will tell you another thing to give you an idea of where my head's at. I would be asked to talk to the rookie cops. And my speech to them went like this. Okay, you're now in a job where people are going to try to kill you. So if you think that's not going to happen, I'm telling you now it's going to happen. They're the bad guys. It's just like the movies. Their job's to kill you. Your job's to stop them. The thing you can't get is mad. You get mad, you lose control. It's just business. Their job is try to hurt you. Your job is to stop them. Now, sometimes, unfortunately, a life has to be taken to make them stop. Right? But we hope, like I was lucky, I never had to do that. I had one of my students who went on to become a sergeant. He was my partner for years. He said to me, why do you think we were never in a shooting? And my immediately response was, because we were good enough. And don't get me wrong, there are some times you cannot avoid the shooting. My son was in a shooting. He's a Phoenix police officer. So there are times when that cannot be avoided. But we were just lucky that we were always in a position where the guy went to try to get the weapon. I trapped his hand. I stopped him before he could get to that weapon. So yeah, so I don't know if that helps answer what your question was, but yeah.
Well, where I'm actually going with it was that, I haven't been in a fight since I started martial arts.
Well, that's good.
And I've been very lucky. I've never been put in one of those positions. I've certainly been confronted a few times and
Right.
stuff like that. But like I said, when I started, I trained with this Japanese teacher who had come over, high ranked at the time relative to all of us. And so at the end of the day, we're 5-day training or something. He has a question answer, and I'm going, well, did you ever use your Aikido on the streets? He says, oh yeah. I said, really? Well, what happened? He said, I use it all the time. I said, well, what happened? He said, well, nothing, because I use it the right way. And I think you may know this. They take the pictures of people on the street. They bring them to the prisons, the muggers and rapists. Say, who would you choose? They all choose the same people.
Right.
It's all kind of a minus key.
Right.
They're looking down there, whatever, there's. And so there was something that I realized, like as I started to just get a more whatever kind of energy thing, that you change the whole relationship with yourself and the universe. All right, so we're going to run out of time, but just to touch
No,
into
we got time. You can keep going. Go ahead.
touch into the quantum stuff, that what quantum physics did, if you've done any study of it at all, basically it just completely destroyed the Newtonian understanding of the universe. It didn't say that it wasn't true.
Right.
It just said that at the same time that this is true in the larger world, in this subatomic world, it doesn't work like that at all. Everything you think, it doesn't happen like that, and what you would intuitively think would be absolutely true isn't true there. And this concept of superposition, you can be in two places at once. An electron can have several states going on, and it doesn't even exist except as a cloud of potential until it actualizes, whatever that means.
Right.
And so what you start to realize is that Bob said, we're energy beings in an energy universe. When you see yourself as an energy field, less than as a person, not that you're not a person, not that you aren't corporal and all that stuff, but as you start to feel yourself as this field of energy that's setting up electromagnetic waves in the universe, we're back to talk about getting lucky again, there's a process when you are uncomfortable, you start to get angry, upset, you do stuff you shouldn't do,
Right.
and we've all done it. And so as you start to recognize that what's going on is that you're getting a rush of energy. Because every
Right.
time you face that, and you've learned to handle it through a lot of practice and whatever. And I think that, like you say, I don't think people realize quite what they're training for. And
Right.
luckily, see, for me, I don't. And I was going to say, outside of security forces, I have almost no one. Everywhere around the world where I go to teach, I always, in the old days, I used to always say, all right, who's, ever had to use their whatever off the, whatever. And they're so rare that
Right.
anyone, there's always a couple. Most of them are police officers or bouncers
Right.
or, the bar. And I say, the bar doesn't count.
Right. Right. Right.
Okay.
I agree with that. I mean,
Yeah.
right. I
So
mean,
we're looking at this quality of how do you exude this right? How do you just, for whatever reason, you were going to go down this street, but you go down the other one instead and you miss it.
right.
Vice versa,
Right.
And you've seen the Seven Samurai, no
Of
doubt. And
course.
so the scene where they come in, the guy standing with the
Right.
club behind the
Right. Right.
thing, and the one guy walks up and goes, "No tricks," and the other guy
Right.
just grabs,
Right.
that sense of presence. That's what I was really training for. I did
Right.
train the other stuff, and I don't think I'm much of a fighter, but I know I would surprise most idiots who
Right.
thought otherwise. And so, I'm looking at this, I'm going, well, all right, I got 55 years, and I was a 6 day a week guy, and I do the morning class, the afternoon class, the evening classes. I go to Capoeira in the middle, I was really into it, the whole thing. And I thought, what am I really doing here? And I would go back to O-sensei and said, first, understand Aikido as Budo, as a way to stop the war. And I know that means the war that's going on in you, because if you aren't projecting that, the chances of you getting into those situations is incredibly diminished. I won't say it couldn't happen.
Right.
It does, there are random violence and all that, but basically, you don't generate it, you don't attract it, whatever. And then understand it as a way to reconcile the world and make human beings one family.
Right.
So I'd leave it with, how do we spend our energy? How do we focus our vibrational, magnetic, what we're generating? And you would think of waves of karma or Joss or something like that. And that I like to think if you could imagine what all the energy that ever went into all your fights, and then all the arguments that everyone's ever had, and all the wars that have ever been fought, if all that had gone into education, commerce, and art, what kind of a world we'd be living in? And I look at the Middle East and I go, the energy that these people have put into causing each other pain, making
Right.
each other angry to cause each other pain, just the reinforcing what Sensei called reciprocating echoes of pain and horror, anger and hatred, that 1/10 of that energy and the money they've spent, they could have turned the desert into a garden. They
Right.
could have lived together in peace and their kids could have played together. And I don't know how we move from here to there, but that's what the study for me is about.
So my Tai Chi Chuan master, Chen Hua, is brilliant. Okay. He once said to me, I was in China for an event he was having, and he said to me, it's very difficult to change an ancient mindset.
Well, that's what the
And
book actually
yeah,
talks about is how do we transform
right.
the energy of being into
Well,
something that when and I know you did this many times, there were a lot of guys that it could have gotten bad with, but it didn't. Bob said there were cops who they always had to use their nightsticks. We called
right.
them hotheads.
Right.
There were
Yeah.
other cops who never did. We called them
Hey,
peace
hey,
officers.
listen, my literally, so I was a New York City transit cop first. So
Right.
that's, and I stayed in the transit division even after we merged with the NYPD. So transit cops, we did solo patrol when we first got out. So you're very rarely dealing one on one. You're dealing one on two, three, four criminals
Right.
very quickly. And you were taught from the get go as a transit police officer, you're on your own. The radios don't work all the time. No one's coming to save you. You're on your own. So you better be able to both handle things physically and again, what you're trained from is your most important tool is this and this. Talk. Learn how to talk. And one of the things I see in modern policing with this whole texting thing is a lot of modern people in law enforcement, they lack that talking because they haven't engaged with people. They engage through texting. They don't engage in the verbal. And you're dealing with criminals, you're not going to text them. You're dealing with them in the verbal, in the actual physical world. Um, so yeah, and one of the things I think too is my karate sensei once said to me, the dojo goes as the head instructor goes. And if the head instructor is a good guy, the people that come to the dojo will be good people. And one of the things I often, when I have a visiting instructor would come into the school in New York, um, at the end of the seminar, they'd always say to me, "Man, your students are great. They're so nice." And that's what I want to hear. I knew they were physically good, but I want people to think that they're good people, right? And it's amazing how, like you talk about the energy. We'd have someone that would walk in the dojo, and I introduce myself, and I always introduce myself. Hi, I'm Mike. Do you have any questions? Yeah, I'm thinking about joining the school. You know, I get the vibe. Yeah, this guy's not a good guy, right? And he gets the vibe. He starts looking up. He sees a law enforcement thing. He goes, "Oh, are you in license? Oh, yeah, I'm a police officer. The guy out there is a police officer. This guy's a lieutenant. And the guy, then everything it changes a little bit because again, he's not on the same wavelength. He's on a different wavelength. So he walks out never to be seen from again. So I think there is, like you talk about energy, a vibe, however you want to put it, that's important in martial arts. And I will say too, is I think if your ability level becomes very high, where you're able to be very good in violent situations, what I noticed later on in my career is I would look at a criminal and he would see either something in my eyes, the way I carried myself, and I wouldn't have to do anything to him. It was more likely he would just put his hands behind his pockets, behind his back, and I could handcuff him. Which was an interesting thing I saw going on too. So again, was that the vibe I gave off? Was that the energy I gave off? I'm fine with that. Whatever, however you want to think of it, I'm fine with it. Talk about the 1+1.
Well, the thing that I would say, if I can just go
Sure,
back just a touch as we go
sure.
into that, the in order for anyone to do anything to you, they've got to come to where you are,
Right,
and they've got to put some power into the spot where you are. And
right,
if you're here and there's resistance, they can put impact. But if you
right,
move with it, they
right,
can't get any impact. So
right,
once you've gotten into that 1+1 becomes one, anything they do just leads you into something that you can then
right,
play with or something like that. So I was going to say, they've got to first they got to have their intent. I think I'm going to get this guy, and
right,
then the intent goes into the neural system, and it goes through the nerves. And the nerves go down and activate the muscles, and the muscles contract and produce this kinesthetic action or whatever movement it's going to be. And what I would say is that when you say, it's energy or something, that's what's going on. That's long before the muscles move.
right.
Their mind has sent neural energy key into the muscles and then activate them to produce kinesthetic action. If you learn to feel the key, which you're saying you did in your way with these people and stuff, at some level, let's just say that was the area I majored in rather than throwing hard or focusing on the. And I did my share of techniques. You can bet after 50 years I put my time in. But my sense was, and I think this is the thing that's so funny is, I've got a bunch of videos up, maybe even watched one of them, but when you look at me train, it just looks so fake. It just doesn't make any sense. Like O Sensei, when I saw
Right,
the first movie, I thought, did they do these in Hollywood or what is
right,
this
right,
bullshit?
right,
But when you start to feel it happen, if you've blended with their intention before it gets into the neural system, and then you're leading it as it goes into the neural system, you've changed it with no force whatsoever. Now that the highest level on the best day.
So my Tai Chi master is the same. So he'll do something and people think it looks fake, but I'm on the receiving end of it and people know me. So they're like, well, there's no way Calandra's faking it because I won't fake it, right? But that goes back to two. I think in the case of like O Sensei, right? He went through that molding, right? He started off as a hardcore martial artist, right? And I think that's kind of where a lot of us start. And then eventually things change. Well, what changes? Well, yeah, okay, I still like that, but There's also so many other aspects. And then again, I think it does lead you to a certain place if you're being guided by the right people.
Well, there's also a nature that you come in with that it's like when we put two musical notes together, somehow they can either
Right.
clash or they if it
Right.
calls it that. But I was going to say that one of the favorite stories that we have, those of us who studied with Bob, was Bob goes to Japan. He's black belt in judo. He's almost black belt in karate. He was a street fighter. He was not the nicest guy in the world,
Right.
and he understood violence.
Right.
And he goes and he says he's kind of went to the Aikido thing as kind of a, well, okay, it was, and then he sees it and he's going, and then he realizes that whatever this guy's doing, it doesn't look, I can see where the other teachers could get to that level. I
Right.
can't figure
Right.
out how
Right.
this guy got here. So he goes and he trains and he's sitting there and he's watching. I don't know how long he'd been there before he just sits, I just, this, like I wish I could just get my turn or something. He says he had the thought, and sensei's pointing at him.
Right.
So he says he got up and he thought he didn't look for what kind of attack he was supposed to do or signal.
Right.
He was going to take this guy down. This was his chance, and he said,
Right.
and he had him. I had him, and then the next thing I knew, I was on the ground. I didn't feel a thing except for maybe a touch on my forehead or something like that. And that's the 1 + 1 = 1. There's no force. There's no
Right.
sense of what goes on.
And to get to that point, I think you have to go through that training. In other words, Sensei, when he started, he couldn't do that.
No,
But
no.
through that training, and again, when I say training, I'm talking the whole package, not just the physical, the mental, the spiritual, everything. And it's the same thing with my Tai Chi master. I took him to a judo and karate school in Long Island, and he's letting people attack him, and they're hitting the mat, and they're getting up, and they have a smile on their face,
That's what I like.
and they look at him and go, "Could you do that again?" And he's like, "Sure," and he's laughing. And then they come at him a different way, and he hits the. And when I go to do seminars in karate or kobudo, people say, "Hey, we understand you do Tai Chi. Could you show us a little bit?" So I always do what's called fixed step push hands, where the goal is you can't move your feet. Whoever moves their feet loses. That means you lost your balance. And
Okay.
I do it with these big hulking karate guys. And I tell them, okay, make me take a step. And then, well, what can I do? You can twist, you can pull, you can push, use all your strength. Don't hold back. And they can't make me take a step. And then I said, okay, I'm going to try to make you take a step. And I hardly move and they fall over. And they're like, we don't understand. And I'm like, that's the whole point.
Yeah.
And, again, so I know exactly what you're talking about. It's a very, very high level that I think is hard to get to. But
Well, I
I
think
think
that
people can get to it if they work towards it, you know?
you've ever heard the four sides of Mount Fuji all end up at the same point.
Right.
I think really, and from what I saw, like Bira, the Capoeira master, he
Right.
used to, I mean, Strozzi and I would say, he's doing Aikido with us. I mean,
Right.
he was just
Right.
whatever. And the same thing, I think most people, and the Funikoshi statement I think I sent you,
Yeah.
the founder of karate, he says, we're not here to learn to fight. We're here to develop the spirit of the people who are there. And what I would say is, Aikido, it's not really about winning and losing. It's about creating a world where that's not even a question.
Right.
And I think that spiritual development of just radiating that, and that's what I hoped I brought to all my work in the international peace building, the mediation, and whatnot, where we start to realize, like, you know what, we could make something, in Sensei's words, rely on harmony to activate your manifold powers, pacify your environment, and create a beautiful world.
And, one of the things I say all the time on the podcast is martial arts is so great because there's a martial art for everybody. And again, it doesn't have to be about fighting. It doesn't have to be about fighting. You can join the school just because you like the camaraderie, you enjoy the physical training. It is what it is. But that's why I think martial arts are so great. It's the biggest thing I think is the character development. I really believe that. Again, if the instructor is moral.
Well, when Noah said to me that you had said to him that nobody ever did like a martial arts attack to you. They were all doing just your clumsy whatever,
Right.
whatever. And I thought anyone who trains martial art has the discipline to do that. They're not going to be like that.
Right.
There's something in that,
Right.
and I would say the term martial art comes from the Roman god Mars, right?
Right.
God of war,
Right.
and so Osensei said. Calm the spirit, return to the source. It's a great love. omnipresent in all times and quarters of the universe. There is no enemy of love. There is no discord in love. Aikido is the real realization of love. And so I, in my little working on my comedy acts, like to say, I don't really train Aikido as a martial art anymore. I train it as Venusial art, an art in the realm of Venus, the goddess of love.
That's
And I
okay.
really feel like I've been able to do that. When I was down, I was just down teaching for 3 weeks in New Zealand, and I had moments. I'm not that good. I had moments where I would clash with people, and then I'd
Right.
get better and whatever. And but everybody that I worked with, where we had, I ended up we ended up just very very good vibe, generally hugging each other. It's like it was exactly what I wanted to leave behind. It's not that I'm a great fighter, forget all that, but I've become a much better person, and aren't I more fun to be around than I used to be? And I think that's where success is for me.
We're going to leave it on that. I'm going to hold up
Good.
your book again, Quantum
All right, Dave.
Aikido, The Power of Harmony, Richard Moon. Um, Interesting book. I'm working my way through it. I recommend it. Okay. Especially if you're a student of Aikido, but even other martial arts, there's something in there for everybody. All right. Richard, I appreciate you coming on. If you ever want to come on again, let me know. And
Mike, I would talk to you anytime. I love this. I really am really honored to get a chance to talk with you. Thanks so
all
much
right.
for having
Thank
me.
you. Take care.
All right. Take good care. Bye bye.
So, hope you enjoyed that interview with Richard Moon. I really enjoyed talking to him. We even continued the conversation off camera a little bit after. Very interesting guy. A lot of life experience. We all want to be there. 80 years young, still out there training on the mat. I hope that someone's interviewing me one day and I'm saying that, all right? Again, please like, share, subscribe. Consider becoming a monthly member. All right. Spread the news about the channel. We're closing in on 20,000 subscribers. Again, crazy numbers, but I couldn't do it with all you guys. All right. Have another interview coming up this weekend, which will drop next week. I'll keep quiet about who it's going to be. So I'll see you in the next podcast. Take care.